The Acer Triton 500 is a thin and powerful gaming laptop, but how well does it perform in games? I'll be testing out 20 games at all setting levels to show you how well it performs, and also compare it against other gaming laptops afterwards to show you the differences. Just quickly before we jump into the benchmark results, I'll cover off the specs in my unit. I've got an Intel i7-8750H CPU, NVIDIA RTX 2060 graphics, and 16GB of memory running in dual channel. The Triton 500 is also available with some different specs. For instance, the higher tier GPU models come with G-Sync. You can find examples and updated prices linked in the description. The Triton 500 allows you to enable turbo mode by pressing the button above the keyboard. And basically this boosts the fan speed and raises the GPU power limit from 80 watts to 90 watts. I didn't find turbo mode to perform any overclocking. However, by default, the GPU memory was always overclocked by 120 MHz. With the latest version 1.06 BIOS, I also found the CPU was undervolted by -0.1 volts. So due to these changes, I'm expecting some decent performance. We'll only be covering gaming performance in this video, so if you're new to the channel, you'll definitely want to get subscribed for the upcoming full review. Let's start out by going through all 20 games at all setting levels, then afterwards we'll see how the Triton 500 compares with some other laptops and see how it stacks up. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode, and I've got the results with RTX off in purple and RTX on in green. It was mostly playable with RTX on at high settings, but generally in a game like this, you'll want to preference higher frame rates. Personally, instead of RTX, I'd rather use ultra settings with RTX off, which in my opinion looks better than RTX on at lower settings while still giving decent FPS. Battlefield 1 was also tested in campaign mode, and like always, it's running well and performing better than the newer Battlefield 5 just shown, with over 100 FPS averages still reached at ultra settings. Apex Legends was tested with either all settings at maximum or all settings at the lowest possible values, as it doesn't have predefined setting presets. It was playing fine even with all settings at maximum, but it was possible to boost average FPS by 36% at minimum settings. The Division 2 was tested with the built-in benchmark. From what I've seen so far, ultra settings always seems to have much lower 1% low results compared to average FPS. Just for a quick comparison, the Lenovo Y540 with 1660 Ti saw a similar 1% low, however the Triton 500 with 2060 reached 13% higher average FPS. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results here are again decent at higher settings, but we'll see how this game compares with other machines soon. Far Cry New Dawn was tested with the built-in benchmark. This game seems to be fairly CPU heavy, so the results aren't really too different compared to other machines with lower or higher tier graphics. Far Cry 5 was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results were ahead of the newer Far Cry New Dawn just covered, and we'll see how this one compares to some other laptops later. I'm expecting the CPU undervolt to improve performance. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and at max settings it was running very well, only just below 100 FPS for the 1% low at maximum epic settings, and even higher possible at lower settings if needed. Overwatch is another well-optimized game, and was tested in the practice range. Again, great performance, only just below the 300 FPS frame cap at low, while epic settings was still very smooth with over 100 FPS even for the 1% low. Metro Exodus was tested using the built-in benchmark. Most parts of the game perform a fair bit better than this, so don't take these results as a good indication of what to expect throughout the entire game. It's more of a worst case, but does let you perform the same test to compare against. CSGO was tested using the Euletical FPS benchmark, and as is pretty much always the case, high FPS from this test, and in line with most other laptops I've tested. Given it depends on the CPU, and most machines I've tested have the same CPU, that's expected. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark. Even with maximum ultra settings, we're getting well above 100 FPS for the 1% low on a 100% render scale, so great performance once more. PUBG was tested using the replay feature, and the results were quite good for this test, but realistically not all that different from a lower spec machine at the lower setting levels. And we're basically getting similar performance between very low and high settings. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was tested with the built-in benchmark, and seems to be a CPU heavy test. At ultra-high settings, the 1% low wasn't too different compared to the thermally throttled Dell G5 I've tested in the past with same 2060 graphics, though averages were higher. Performance at lower settings was below the Asus Scar 2 with 2060 I recently tested too. Dota 2 was tested playing in the middle lane with an average amount of action going on, and the results were quite good here. Noticeably above other 2060 machines I've tested, both in terms of 1% low and average FPS by a fair amount. I suspect this is due to the CPU undervolt though. This game doesn't really care about high-end graphics. Watch Dogs 2 uses a lot of resources, however 60 FPS averages at ultra settings is quite a good result, considering I can play it just fine with a consistent 30 FPS. So no noticeable issues for me while playing even at max settings. Ghost Recon is another resource-intensive game and was tested with the built-in benchmark. Generally, we need quite powerful laptops to hit 60 FPS at this test in Ultra, and we're a bit behind here. However, still quite decent frame rates at lower setting levels. The Witcher 3 was playing fine with Ultra settings. While the 1% low is a fair bit behind the average, it's not that bad. And again, still a fair bit better compared to the other 2060 laptops tested, with much higher possible at lower settings. Doom was tested using Vulkan, and is a game that pretty much always runs quite well on modern hardware, so with our powerful specs here, we're getting great performance. Ultra settings was playing perfectly smoothly, with over 100 for the 1% low. Strange Brigade was another game that was tested with Vulkan, but was tested with the built-in benchmark, and is another test that always provides high frame rates, with ultra settings still reaching over 100 FPS with fairly high 1% lows compared to averages, which seems standard for this test. Let's also take a look at how this config of the Acer Triton 500 compares with other laptops to see how it stacks up. Use these results as a rough guide only, as they were tested at different times with different drivers. In Battlefield 5, I've got the Triton 500 highlighted in red near similarly spec'd machines. In this game, it's easily outperforming the other two RTX 2060 machines that I've got here. The Dell G5, which is lower due to thermal throttling, and Asus Scar 2. The 1% low result is significantly higher, most likely due to the default CPU undervolt that's in place on the Triton 500 with latest BIOS. These are the results from Far Cry 5 with ultra settings in the built-in benchmark. There's less of a difference now, as this seems to be more of a CPU-driven test, and for the most part these machines have similar CPUs. With that said though, the results from the Triton 500 are still above the other RTX 2060 machines shown here, though realistically not by much. These are the results from Shadow of the Tomb Raider with the built-in benchmark at highest settings. Again, the Triton 500 is ahead of the other RTX 2060 machines covered, most likely due to the modifications Acer are doing to the machine, including higher GPU memory speed, higher GPU power limit, and a CPU undervolt by default with the latest BIOS. Overall, the Acer Triton 500 is performing quite well considering the specs that it's got. As we've seen, it's often outperforming other machines tested with similar hardware inside. In most cases, you could of course further improve those other machines by manually making similar changes yourself. But it's nice to see Acer doing these performance improvements by default, which will greatly benefit those just buying a laptop and using it with out-of-the-box settings. Believe it or not, the majority of users don't tweak their machines. In the next video, we'll check out thermal performance. As a thinner machine with powerful specs, it'll be interesting to see how well it does there. Let me know what you thought of the gaming performance from the Acer Triton 500 gaming laptop down in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, you'll definitely want to get subscribed for the full review to see everything this machine has to offer.